Welcome to the Worldshapers, conversations with authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and this episode's guest, James Kinsley, talking about his latest science fiction novel, Parallels. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Worldshapers, the podcast where I talk to other authors about their latest work. I am Edward Willett. I am myself an author, and in fact, I have a new book out. Look, here it is. There it is. See? Fireboy. It's a middle grade / young adult fantasy novel, a modern day fantasy novel set in Alberta, in the foothills of the Rockies. And briefly, it's about a girl who missed out on a field trip in grade 7, and she's now going into grade 8. But her grade 7 field trip ended badly when the science class that was on it disappeared. The bus was found turned over onto its side, and the only people still remaining were the teacher, unconscious, who was also the bus driver, and back in the back, also unconscious, buried under a bunch of camping equipment, another girl named Meg. So the main character, Sam, is a little perturbed about that. And then as she's out camping with her father, her best friend, Lorenzo, who is on that trip, suddenly shows up in the campfire, made out of fire. And that's kind of weird. And then he turns up again in her backyard and tells her that the kids are still alive somewhere, but strange things are happening to them. And among other things, they're getting turned into things like him, who's now made out of fire. So Sam and her, not really her friend, she becomes a friend, but the only other girl who is left from that grade 7 science class, the one who is in the back of the bus, have to figure out what's going on and find out what's behind it all and hopefully save the kids. So that's Fireboy. It's out now everywhere in ebook and print, and I hope you'll look for it. It's from Shadowpaw Press, which is my own publishing company. Shadowpaw Press is a very small publishing company, but we publish an eclectic selection of titles. We, me and the cat. And another recent title from Shadowpaw Press is this one, Gods of a New World. It's a cyberpunk thriller that just came out by Ryan Melsom, an Ottawa author. Let's see. Very quickly, in the future, after bad times that were made less bad by the interaction of trillionaires, I should say, and advanced AI, they managed to basically save the world. That wasn't enough for them. Now they want to really control the world at the very level of reality. They call themselves gods, and they're trying to literally become gods. And this is about two very different ordinary people who try to somehow stop that, prevent it, or mitigate it. It's called Gods of a New World by Ryan Melsom, and it's also out everywhere right now. The other recent Shadowpaw Press title I want to mention is this one because it ties directly to the podcast. Shapers of Worlds Volume 5 is the 5th and final anthology featuring authors who were guests on this podcast. It was kickstarted successfully last year, came out earlier this year, has a lot of great short stories in it by a lot of great authors whose interviews you can also listen to here in the archives of the Worldshapers. You can find some of those here in the YouTube channel, if that's where you're watching this, or you can find it on the website at theworldshapers.com. So that's some of the stuff that's coming out from Shadowpaw Press. Coming up this fall, I have poetry and a couple of reprints. So still very, very busy here at Shadowpaw Press World Headquarters, putting out books and writing myself as well. I'm currently working on a new novel myself. However, we're here to talk to somebody else about their book, and that somebody is James Kinsley and his novel, Parallels. So just it's a very short bio, but we'll learn a lot more about James as we talk to him. James Kinsley was born in Norfolk in the 1970s, where he still lives with his wife and their 2 blind cats, and I didn't think to ask him about the blind cats. Parallels is his 3rd book. He is also the author of Playtime's Over from Propolis and Greyskin from Deixis Press. He also self-publishes sci-fi under the name Ray Adams, and that's available on Kindle. So let's meet James now. So James, welcome to the Worldshapers.
Hello there, Ed. Hi, thanks for having me.
We've had a bit of a back and forth trying to connect here because, for a number of reasons, but one is the fact that you are some 7 hours different from me, and you're currently in Norfolk, and I'm in Saskatchewan, so there is that, and yet amazing modern technology makes this possible.
Excellent. Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's the opportunity to meet people and talk like this over the net. I mean, it's fantastic these days, isn't it?
Well, we both write science fiction, and of course, when I was growing up, this was science fiction, the idea that you could ever do this. Well, and of course, not to mention the little pocket computer thing here. So,
well, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So let's start at the very beginning. where did you grow up? Where did you get educated? Assuming you're educated. And how did you get started writing? You probably started as a reader. Most of us did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in Norfolk. I still live sort of less than 10 miles from where I was born. My parents still live in the same village, so very centered here. I most of my education here, although I did won't go away to university. I spent 3 years at the University of Hull studying philosophy. But yes, so far as being a writer goes, that's been something that I've wanted to do since before I can even remember. I've some of my earliest recollections of primary school are writing stories, usually knockoff versions of things that I'd just been watching. I was born in the mid-70s, so I was right there for Star Wars coming out, and obviously that was so as a science fiction writer, a huge influence on me, and still is. So yeah, it kind of blossomed in me then, that storytelling and that particular genre for storytelling, the power of that genre for telling stories, sort of blossomed in me straight away and never really gone away.
Well, you mentioned the Star Wars and obviously the media side of things. Were there books in there that also influenced your interest and your desire to tell stories in written form?
Yeah, not so much from a really early age. My experience of genre writing probably kicked in later. I mean, I read an awful lot as a child, but that was mainly, I grew up in a small village, so I mainly read what was available to me in the local library, which, was a bit of potluck. But yes, it's certainly, I think, one of the books that first turned me on to this genre as a way of telling sort of more adult stories. Not to be disparage Star Wars in that regard, but was probably The Anubis Gate by Tim Powers.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that my brother gave me when I was a young teenager. And that was a real eye opener in terms of realizing that this genre didn't just exist in the kind of uh, pulp adventures that I was possibly taking in as a child, but actually there was a grown up literary side to the genre that kind of excited me and intrigued me and pulled me in, and therefore made me want to sort of think more seriously about what the genre could do. Um, Fantasy, because I kind of hold sci-fi and fantasy together in one kind of thing, as they so often are in bookshops and stuff. I mean,
I write both, so
yeah. So for me, Weiss and Hickman, the Dragonlance Chronicles, that was something as well that as a teenager was a huge, huge influence on me. I suppose Chronicles of Narnia as well, going back slightly further, would have been something that I consumed as a child. And again, that idea of being able to create different worlds and yet still use them to make a point about the world we live in. That was, yeah, that was something that definitely played a part in bringing me to where I am now as a writer.
so when did you start writing seriously, as in wanting people to read it and trying to get it out there in some fashion?
Um, on and off. I've since I was a teenager, I've started various things. There was a couple of abortive attempts at a novel. Um, I've got some rejection letters from a project when I was in my early 20s, rightfully so, because the project was awful. Probably seriously, though, it would be the pandemic was the big change for me. Um, I imagine, like a lot of people, I was working for theatre at the time, which obviously meant that there was no way we could continue through the first wave of lockdowns. So I went on furlough for 6 months. So 6 months just sitting at home and trying to sort of prove my worth while my wife was working from home. And that opened the way for me to finish a novella that I had started working on before, but I now had the time to sort of focus on it, and the realization that I was never going to have this opportunity again of having this chunk of time where I wasn't working, and it was all right that I wasn't working. So I kind of pushed through on that novella and really fell into the publishing thing, because I have a contact that I know in Norwich who runs a bookshop, but also supplies, also publishes as well. He has a small publishing imprint, and I didn't think of asking him to publish it, but I did go to him just to ask for some advice. I said, I've written this thing, just finished it, don't really know what I'm doing next. And he surprised me by saying, let's have a look at it. And he did. And within a few weeks of finishing that first draft, I had a publishing contract. So I mean, it happened really, really quickly. And yeah, it kind of really took off from there. So it's only really the last 5 years. That's bizarre to think that when you start with the pandemic, we still think of it as being so recent. But yeah, the last 5 years, everything kind of exploded in a way, publishing wise for me. But yeah, that was the trigger point. That was the turning point where I was reaching a certain age as well, and the realization that if I don't push myself to do this thing that I've said I've always dreamed of doing, but maybe not ever quite put in the effort to until that point. And I was kind of, yeah, I'm now at the point where if I don't take advantage of this opportunity, then I'm not serious about it, and it's never going to happen. So yeah.
I just want to back up for a minute, because you said you were working in theater, and I'm a theater guy. So what were you doing?
Oh, really? Yes. So I worked box office for 8 years for our local theatre, and then spent a couple of years with the marketing department. So yeah, nothing, not on the artistic side at all. I work for a small arts charity at the moment, and again, nothing on the artistic side at all. I'm very much kind of an admin spreadsheet kind of person. But the idea of using those skills to support the arts, particularly given that a lot of arts practitioners aren't necessarily so adept at the more organizational side, shall we say. Yeah, I find it's a good way that I can contribute to something that I am passionate about, although have little skill or aptitude for.
Yeah, I've done theater, amateur and some professional theater, and directed and written plays and all that kind of stuff. So when you said theater, my ears perked up. So. And I haven't done
Yeah,
box office,
I mean,
I've certainly done the communications stuff, because if you're in community theater, of course, everybody
you have to do it yourself. Yeah.
So
very much like publishing in that regard.
Well,
In
today,
even
for
if you,
sure,
yeah.
So that first novella, what was it called? And
that was called Playtime's Over. That was about a man who is dying. He's, I was going to say, attempted to take his own life. He is in the process of taking his own life, and he, in the moments before he passes away, he finds himself waking up in this world of the imagination, where he's having this conversation with what is essentially his alter ego, or the kind of manifestation of his subconscious, looking back over his life and his attitudes and his ideas and his relationships, and therefore why he has ended up in the place that he's in. So it was quite a personal project for me. I suffer from depression and anxiety myself. It was set in my hometown, so again, and very clearly set in my hometown. I didn't name it, but all the references were very obviously my hometown, and so it was very much really came from inside, and something that with men's mental health being such a big issue these days, was something that I felt very important. So that was something that I really bought into in creating that book, and something I'm still very proud of. Even if it's slightly different to the stuff I'm doing now. Yeah, it's, as a first book, I was immensely proud of it.
And then what happened after that? So you had the first one out, you found a publisher in fairly short order, and then
Yep.
it's like, okay, now what do I do next?
Yeah, and this was the bizarre thing, because that's the only book that I published with Propolis, and I moved over to Deixis Press, but again was a very quick process, very rapid process, and very surprising process, because they'd Angel, my current publisher, had put a shout out on social media. She was looking for authors to give her a quote for a book that she was putting out, and she knew somebody I'd been at university with, and that person tagged me into the post and said, "Oh, James, you should do this." And before I even had a chance to think about it, because my initial reaction was simply, "Well, that's preposterous. I'm not anybody." Playtime hadn't even come out at that point.
Mhm.
And I was like, my name on a book cover is not going to serve any purpose for anyone. But before I could even say that, the publisher got in touch with me and was like, "Yeah, would you do this for me?" So I said yes. Explained, because I still thought, she can't actually want my name. Is not going to, as I say, not going to serve any purpose. But no, she was happy with that, and yeah, so I read the book, which I really enjoyed.
That's probably a good thing,
Which
because it would
was,
have been awkward if you hadn't.
well, quite, yes. Yeah, so that was the Workshop of Filthy Creation, by Richard Gadz, which I really enjoyed. Gave her a quote, and she offered, off the back of that, to have a look at any projects I had. So I sent her over a couple of things, one of which was Greyskin, which turned into my next book, and the other one of which was Parallels, which is the one that's just come out this year. And so again, a second fell into a second publishing deal without really feeling like I put in the spade work to get there. It is one of those things that it's sometimes it is just a question of putting the right book in front of the right person at the right time, and
Well,
I've been incredibly lucky. So
I have the small publishing company Shadowpaw Press, and I've never opened to submissions because projects keep coming to me in this kind of way, and opening to submissions and getting flooded with 1,000 things is not appealing to me as a one person and a cat operation. So,
yeah,
so yeah, it does happen that way for sure. Now, at some point in here,
absolutely.
you started self-publishing under a pseudonym as well. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so that was that came about. And I'm kind of hazy on the timeline now because it all kind of happened around the same time. I think I probably finished the first book of those after Playtime and everything was set up for that, but before Playtime actually came out. And that project had really come about through trying to deal with my tendency to procrastinate and my tendency to not believe in the things that I'm doing. So again, sort of tied in with my mental health issues. And so I decided because my biggest stumbling block for a writer for the decades between those teenage years of wanting to be a writer and this actually happening, my biggest stumbling block was just my inability to handle sort of my own critical reaction to my own work. By which I mean, every time I started a project, I'd get about 20, 30 pages in, would put it down, and the next time I picked it up would be so mortified at how awful it was that I just couldn't bear to even look at it again. And so I finally realized that this this problem wasn't going to go away. So I was going to have to approach it from a different angle. So I wrote something with the very express intention of not caring how good it was. I was like, I'm just going to write. It's going to be a sort of space adventure, sci-fi kind of pot boiler almost, if you like. And I'm absolutely not going to pay any attention to whether or not it's any good. And if it turns out terrible, that's fine. That's an acceptable outcome, but at least it will be finished. And in being finished, it will have at least one quality that none of these other projects have ever had, because none of them actually got to that point. So I wrote this, again, quite short novella, and was actually quite gratified when I got to the end of it, looking back over it, that it wasn't as bad as I feared it was. Took some tidying up, but I thought, actually, no, I can get behind this. I was interested in the idea of self-publishing. And so I thought, well, it can't hurt. I'll put it out there. And I think the timing, had I reached that realization of what I had to push through in order to get something finished, if I'd have reached that realization earlier, it's quite possible that I would have written something, got to the end, and it would have been as terrible as I feared. So I kind of feel that everything that's happened to me in the last few years, although I'm coming to being a published author later in life than a lot of people do, I just feel it's the right time for me. I think I've had enough experience and enough practice now that everything's sort of come good at the right time. And I'm dealing with my mental health issues better. I'm on a lot leveler plane, which means the slight ups and downs, the disappointments you experience, I'm better at handling them. And yeah, certainly I don't think I would have produced something as good as the self-published work is, say 5-10 years ago. So yeah, I put that out, sold a few.
What's the name you write under?
Ray Adams. I wanted something that kind of summoned up the idea of a 50s, 60s, 70s pulp writer sitting there at his typewriter with a pipe, kind of thing. And it just, yeah, that was a nice, simple, straightforward name that I thought would do. And yeah, so I've just finished my 6th one of those, which I'm hoping to get out by the end of the year. I'm barely selling any, if I'm honest, but it's fun, and it's been a great learning experience between, or being, having, this hybrid career where I've got traditional publishing and self-publishing under my belt, has been really been really valuable to me, because there's a lot of things that I've learned as a self-published author that have helped with the traditional publishing, expectations being one of them, but also things that I've learned from obviously traditional publishing that have helped a lot with the self-publishing, both in terms of marketing and what's required, but also the fact that I'm in the collaborative work I've done with the editors that have worked on my book, I've become a much better writer. And so that's not only benefiting obviously my traditionally published work, it's also benefiting my self-publishing. So yeah, it's I'm really enjoying having the two strands, because I think having the complete freedom with one of them kind of offsets the sometimes resistance that early career writers have to having people interfere with their work.
So let's talk about Parallels. That's the new one. And I guess the place to start is to give a synopsis without giving away anything you don't want to give away.
Okay, so Parallels follows two men who are both experiencing debilitating psychological blackouts and hallucinations. Jeff, who is very much a contemporary figure, contemporary British man in an ordinary British town, keeps blacking out and having visions of being Jezz, a character an American who is in China fighting with a united multinational army against an alien invasion. Jezz, having experienced a chemical warfare attack from the alien invasion, having blackouts and waking up as Jeff. So these two men both believe their experience of the other life is a hallucination. And really it's so yeah, the question is, which one of them is real, which one is the hallucination? And there's a third figure who manifests just before the blackouts occur in both realities, that is obviously tied into the mystery somehow, but we're not sure how. And it's kind of the balance between the two lives for me in kind of the interpretation that's running under the story is the fact that on the one hand you have this safe, comfortable existence that Jeff has that doesn't necessarily give him purpose, whereas Jezz has great purpose, but in very difficult and dangerous circumstances. And there's kind of an underlying theme of reconciling those two things and how we need both those things in life. But yeah, that's the basic premise.
Okay, then the next question is the old hoary one of where do you get your ideas? But what was the spark from which Parallels arose?
This, and I am having to think back here, because it was quite a long time when I started this, but I started with the idea. I started with the Jeff character, who was called Harrison for some reason at that point when I first started writing it. And I was trying to write something that felt ordinary and everyday, because I got so used to writing these outlandish, sci-fi stories, that I was trying to write something more grounded. And I had this idea of this woman who appeared, who then things happened and he started to lose his grip on reality. So it very quickly went from me trying to write something grounded in the everyday to still being fantastic and science fiction. But yeah, I very much started with that character, and it was about his not being able to trust his own reality, and that was the starting point for it. And then once I'd had the kind of first blackout and hallucination, I realized I was just as interested in the character on the other side of that, and that's when it kind of segued into being this dichotomy between the two characters.
Saying that the character started as Harrison and turned into Jeff, the last person that I interviewed, Ryan Melsom, mentioned that for him, all his male characters are called Jeff to start with, and then he finds out what the real name is later as he keeps writing. So
it's a great name. It's a great name. I love the name Jeff, and yeah, I have had repeated. In fact, this is as an aside. Jezz has a brother called Keith in Parallels, who pops up at one point, and clearly that name resonates with me on some level, because when I handed in my next work to my publisher, when it went to their proofreader, he came back and he said, "You do realize that the character in this book has got a brother called Keith, just the same way that Jezz in Parallels had a brother called Keith. You're going to have to change that." I hadn't even noticed, but yeah, clearly I operate in the same way without realizing.
Yeah, things run around in your head like that all the time and can pop out unexpectedly. So,
Keith,
what was your
Keith's
plan?
just a brother. Sorry?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say Keith is just a brother's name, isn't it? Nobody's called Keith, but a brother can be Keith. That's
what was the planning process for you then? You started writing. Do you just start writing and then you discover the story, or do you do a lot more planning than that?
No, I'm very much I write in a very linear way. So vast majority, if not all of the time, the first sentence I write will be the first sentence of the book. The last sentence I write will be the last sentence. And if I have an idea of where I'm going, it's only ever a rough, vague idea, and I do tend to let the plot unfold as I go along, which has served me well to date. But it is something that I'm trying to get away from in my next book, because I feel if I rely too much on that, I'm not gonna. I need to, or I want to develop other skills, and actually planning is something that I do want to develop, because I kind of feel that you can only be there's so books that have convoluted and very intricate plots with lots of different threads going in between them. You can't do that without serious planning, and it's a string I'd like to add to my bow. But so far, I've very much been of the sit down, start writing, see what happens, see where it goes. School.
What is your actual writing process? Do you write every day? Do you write at home in a coffee shop?
I write at home. I write usually once a week. I have 2 part-time jobs, and I actually only sit down at the keyboard once a week, but I do kind of justify that in that a lot of the time I will have things ticking over in my brain all the time. So Monday is my non-working day. So when I sit down to write on a Monday, I'm more than capable of just sitting down at 9 o'clock and writing through till 5 without any hesitation. And I will, bang out a fairly considerable number of words. And that's because the work's been going on in my head for the last 6 days. So actual writing is only once a week at my laptop in my dining room. But yeah, it will be a good solid 8-hour shift, and it's kind of processing all the things that have been going through my mind for the last 6 days. So yeah, I'm thinking about it all the time and blurting it out once a week.
They also unless I'm on it, only stand and wait.
Yes, unless I'm on a hot streak, and then there are times when I will, particularly if I'm coming towards the end of a book and I'm getting particularly excited about it, then evenings, mornings before work, weekends sometimes will start coming in once I've got that momentum and I want to get it out and I know where I'm going. But a lot of the time I do find that 6 day, that kind of non-writing downtime is essential because that's where everything's, falling into shape. So I guess you could argue that in some ways I am a planner. It's just that all the planning's upstairs and it's, up here.
A lot of little
And
post-it notes all over the.
exactly, yes, yeah. I'm going to enter the world of post-it notes for, if not the next book, the one after, definitely. But we'll at the moment it's all in my head.
Once you had the draft, and what does your revision process look like? And do you involve beta readers or anything like that?
I don't. I haven't made extensive use of that. I do sometimes. I did with Parallels, which was very useful both for tone, but also some quite specific details which some people picked me up on, and some bad writing habits that I'd possibly got into. So that was, I do think it's an immensely useful process. And the sixth self-published book that I've just finished, that I did put a shout out at work. My other job, I work at a university, so there's a large body of individuals working there. So I put out a shout out for anyone who wanted to read that, and I had half a dozen people who didn't know me, which I think is critical, really, because you don't.
Yes.
Yeah, friends will tell you that it's great, and
well, mothers are
even
useless that way. It's like, oh, you wrote another book. That's nice.
indeed. So yeah, I really like having people who don't know me reading it and then sort of giving me their feedback. So yeah, I'm kind of moving more into that. But yeah, generally, I mean, certainly with Greyskin, which was a book I had out before Parallels, that just went straight to my publisher. But that one, I was a lot more confident, I think, in what I was doing with that. And so I wasn't necessarily looking for other people's input. Whereas Parallels, I was definitely much more receptive to getting some feedback with that, because I was a bit less sure about some of the things that I'd done in it, some new things I was trying, and some more adult content, which I was slightly less comfortable with. So from that point of view, it was very important to get other people's feedback to see whether or not it was working. But with both Playtime and the books that I've put out with my current publisher, I've been very lucky in not only getting those deals in a relatively straightforward way, but both publishers are people whose taste and ability I rate very highly. Henry, who put out my first book, was the person who, I don't know how big this was over your way, but Emma McBride's Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. It won.
That's all I can say.
Yeah, it was a big prize winner over here. She tried 10 years to get that published and been rejected by pretty much everyone. And Henry had grabbed it and said yes and put it out. And then it was a huge, huge success. So I had absolute faith in him, in whatever he told me about Playtime. I would be happy with just accepting that. And again, with Angel, by the time we finally agreed to do Greyskin, which was about a year after I'd first got in contact with her, by that point, I'd read 6 or 8 of the books she put out on Deixis Press, and all of them were extraordinary. She's got such an eye for good, strong literature covering a range of genres, that I thought, yes, if she wants to publish me, I want to be with her, because she clearly is putting out excellent books and she knows what needs to be done with them to make them great. So there's a degree in which I've kind of put a lot of trust in that one person. But yeah, sometimes it is very useful to get other people's input as well, just to make you feel a bit more relaxed about it.
With your publishers, then it sounds like you've been happy with the editing process you got on that side of things.
Absolutely, very much so.
You mentioned earlier about beginning writers or ones that are just starting to get published are a little antsy about people messing with their prose. Sounds like you got over that.
Very quickly. I mean, I have been lucky in the set. Well, I say lucky. I mean, both of them have been quite light touches. I haven't had huge sways of the text sort of struck out or having to be reshaped or anything, which I can understand. If that had been my experience, I might have taken it more personally. But I decided straight away, as soon as I got into even talking about publishing, that it was basically a toss up between having, you know, a book that I've worked with somebody else who knows what they're doing and has past experience of putting out books, and therefore is someone I should be listening to, and that would be a book. Or I could have the story being exactly what it was and how I wanted it and how I wrote it, and it would be a Word document on my laptop, and that's all it would ever be. So, you know, if I wanted to, and that I feel is part of a product of my age of just knowing, you know, being a bit more kind of realistic about the fact that, okay, other people do have better experience than me. I should be listening to other people. And actually, from a purely pragmatic point of view, if I'm going to go down that path, then there are some things that I'm going to have to accept. And when you do that, you realize that actually those people, they do want your book to be as good as it can be. They're not criticizing you for the sake of criticizing you or trying to push you out of the way. Or certainly has not been my experience. You would hope with any decent publisher, what would be driving them is the same thing that drove you when you wrote it, which is the best possible book that can be by the time it gets into readers' hands.
Well, speaking as a publisher, that's what I want. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking as an author, I've never had a problem with being edited. So,
yeah. I mean, I just can't imagine the chutzpah required to think that go into, you know, as a new writer, thinking that you've got the experience or even the knowledge to know exactly what your book should be and not wanting to listen to anyone. Maybe that's to do with my self-esteem issues, but I can't even imagine what that takes to put yourself in that situation and start insisting that you know everything.
Well, you've had books out now for a while, and let's see, Parallels came out when?
May.
In May.
May 25th, yeah.
Have you been pleased with the response you've gotten from your books? Do you think that readers are getting out of the books what you hoped you had put into them?
Yeah, very much so. Parallels has been a bit more contentious than either of my previous books, purely in terms of I've had a small amount of feedback where people have really hated the ending. But I can live with that. I mean, again, I'm quite happy with that. When I do get negative feedback, either during the process or after publication, there's two ways that you can look at that. Either the person knows what they're talking about and you can learn from it, or they don't know what they're talking about and you don't have to worry about it. So, yeah, Parallels has been a pleasant surprise actually, because the more negative feedback I did get from it was very much early doors, and actually I'm now hearing quite a buzz around people reading it, saying how much they loved it, how much they really enjoyed it, how much one person told me that they've enjoyed it more than Greyskin, think it's a better book. And I think certainly some of the things that I've learned from doing those previous books have been stronger in this book. I think it's the strongest from a characterization point of view. I think the characters are stronger in this than I've been able to write before. And so, yeah, it's people do seem to be getting it, which is reaffirming, definitely.
And what are you working on now?
So I've got one more book coming out this year. Well, two more books. The self-published one I've mentioned. I've also got another book coming out from Deixis Press in a couple of months. What I'm working on at the moment is a bit of a change of direction for me. It's more horror themed. It is very much a horror book. I'm trying to capitalize on that, but it's a 1920s stately home setting, involving a young man being dispatched by his aunt to a stately home in Norfolk to investigate a great evil that his aunt has had a premonition of. And so it's sort of, I'm billing it in my head as P.G. Wodehouse meets H.P. Lovecraft, which I think is a nice, simple hook to what I'm trying to achieve with it. It's written in first person, which is a new thing for me. And yeah, kind of trying to balance there is humor in it, and horror, and it's trying to balance that in a way that it doesn't turn the horror into spoof, but is genuinely funny and segues into something genuinely chilling. So I've set myself a bit of a high bar with this one, but I'm certainly very pleased with how it's going at the moment. So yeah, that's the current work in progress.
Sounds like it should be fun to write.
It is very much so, very much so. And I love the thing I'm really enjoying about the first person writing is that whole thing of finding a character's voice and then having to maintain it all the time. So it's not just in dialogue, but your whole prose style has to change to accommodate this character that you've created and sell it as being the person who's actually telling the story, which is, a huge challenge, but as you say, really good fun as well.
Well, the other challenge, and I've done first person as well, and the other challenge with first person, of course, is that you can't have somebody off in another scene showing something that's happening. If you stick,
Absolutely.
and I actually have done books where I did one character in first person, but other scenes in third person, just to make that possible, and it seemed to
Kind of
work.
fill in those gaps.
It's
Yeah.
not something I've seen very often. So, where can people find you online?
Yeah. So I have my own website, unclekins.wordpress.com. For some reason, I've stuck with Uncle Kins as I don't have children of my own, but I do have 5 nieces and nephews, so I kind of see myself as an uncle figure. Substack, Instagram, Facebook, all of that, except Twitter for obvious reasons. So yeah, I am trying to keep up an online presence, as you'll know. It's so important these days when you're a writer to kind of capitalize on any way that you can build a relationship with readers. It's one of the trickier aspects of being a writer, I think, these days, but it's not something we can ignore. But yeah, the Substack is the thing that I'm probably putting the most time into at the moment. So again, that's just unclekins.substack.com. Yeah, I'm having fun with it, but yeah, it's having to be a bit more disciplined and remembering that I'm not just me. I am representing my publisher, and this is coming back to what you were asking about earlier about the self-publishing under a different name. The reason I went with a different name is because I feel with self-publishing, although it's a lot more respected these days, there is a sense in which there's no gatekeeping around that. Anyone can self-publish. Anyone can get a book out there online for sale with, in a matter of, once they've finished writing it, within a matter of minutes, which is great. Downside of that is, of course, that anyone can do it. And so I went with this, with another name, with an esteemed name for that, to keep it separate from the stuff that's under my own name, because I didn't want, if I did slip up with the self-published stuff, I didn't want that to reflect badly on the traditionally published stuff. And again, with the whole online thing, yeah, there are challenges again in remembering that to some degree you are representing. I almost see it as being an employee relationship with the publisher. It's I've got a responsibility to conduct myself in such a way that won't embarrass my publishers. So yeah, it's an interesting balance to strike. Sometimes when things happen and you want to comment on them in a particular way, a lot of the political things that are happening at the moment, you just question yourself: should I possibly temper my words slightly in certain situations?
Yeah, I temper myself all the time because I'm actually I am a publisher now,
Yeah,
and I also am not going to. I don't want to, lash out at one of my authors who maybe said something I didn't agree with. It's just, yeah, there's a lot of that that sort of balancing going. If I had my way, I wouldn't be on social media at all. I would just be sitting here and writing. But it's not the world we live in. So
absolutely not. And it's it's interesting because when Playtime came out, my publisher had another author who had a book out similar time that year, was putting another one out, And that author, I probably should be discreet and not say too much, but backed away from quite a lot of the promotion for the book, because they, well, again, I won't go into the reason, but anyway, had backed away from quite a lot of the promotion of the book, which I think was simply a product of having had quite a long career, and therefore when I had started out, it not being an integral part of the process. And certainly one of the things I've learned now is, and again, this is, as I say, one of the benefits of being self-published as well as traditionally published, is understanding how integral all of that is to promoting yourself. And therefore, you know, me writing a book is only part of the job that I'm doing for my publisher. The other part of the job that I'm doing for my publisher is selling me as an author and trying to build an audience and keeping an audience.
Well, hopefully this conversation helped in that regard. And
Hopefully so.
thanks so much for being on. I enjoyed the chat. I hope you did as well.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And thanks again to James for being on the program. I enjoyed that chat. I hope you did as well. And I still regret I didn't ask him about the blind cats. That's it for this episode. Let's just go over the things that you need to know, such as you can find the Worldshapers online at theworldshapers.com. You can find it on Facebook at the Worldshapers. You can find it on Twitter at the Worldshapers. Sorry, X. You can find me at edwardwillett.com. You can see the spelling right there. You can find me on X at ewillett, on Facebook at edward.willett, on Instagram at edwardwillettauthor. I'm missing something. What am I missing? Well, I'm other places as well, and also YouTube. Obviously, if you're watching this on YouTube at just Edward Willett, I still think I'm missing something important. Oh well, you can find me. I actually tend to take up the first 2 pages of Edward Willett search terms on Google, so I'm not hard to find. Shadowpaw Press, my publishing company, is at shadowpawpress.com. You can find it on X at Shadowpaw Press. You can find it on Facebook at Shadowpaw Press, and you can find it on Instagram at Shadowpaw Press. That's what I forgot. Instagram is Edward Willett Author. So that's this episode of the Worldshapers. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will continue to come back as I continue to talk to other authors about their latest works. That's it for this time. Bye for now.